wait for the connection here. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of epic conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Also know I'm a certified empowerment coach and president of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. And as always, thanks for stopping by, whether it's live or on the replay. And we are always blessed to have returning friends come back to the Dr. Vibe Show. And this young man, I guess, I don't know how long ago we first chatted. It was a while back. And we sort of went our separate ways and we got reconnected. But then I said, I'd like you to come back on and have an epic conversation. He said, no, my Celtics are in the playoffs. So I said to him, I'm not going near you till your Celtics are done. Well, the Celtics are done, and that's the Boston Celtics in the NBA. And don't be ashamed. They
are as done as they've ever been. I'm not. I honestly knew this was going to happen, so I'm actually not surprised.
Okay, well, he accepts defeat graciously. He's handling it right quick. It's Alexander Williams. He's from Lancaster, California. He is a Celtics fan, as we already mentioned, an avid thinker, and a sap for experience. He cares about disadvantaged African and Native American communities and worries that tomorrow could be his last day here on Earth. Let's be positive. Come on. We want you at least last till the end of this conversation, all right?
I mean, I'm trying to, I try to be serial comic.
Yes. He's got that tinge, and I put tinge of sarcasm. Now, you know he's a sarcastic guy with this. He's a communist, an anarchist, and a pacifist. Yeah, okay. Maybe he should be maybe he needs to be in Washington right now. That's another conversation. He was always a smart kid that you would tell your younger brothers about, and the only guy you know with Dr. Seuss Chucks. Don't know where that's going, and I'm not going down that street. He also raps, but then also, again, he writes, and then he also acts. So he just does a lot of things. Plus, he is launching a brand new podcast, which I'm very excited about. So welcome to the Dr. Vibe Show, Epic Conversations. Alexander Williams, what is up, my man?
Well, just like you said, watching the king return from his castle to make it to the NBA Finals once more.
There you go.
That's what I've been up to. And to be honest, I don't know what people have been talking about. This NBA season has been amazing. It fulfilled all of my requirements. I'm looking forward to Thursday, and I think it's going to be a really good show. Going to be rocky,
So before you leave tonight, you're going to give us a prediction, right?
Oh, I have to. I mean, isn't that first take part of this show?
No, we'll wait till the end. I have a sense what you're going to say, but I'm gonna just leave it be. We'll wait till the end. The end to see what happens. So it's been a while since you've been with us, and probably there's some new people on the platform now watching on the conversation. Can you give a little background about yourself, my man?
Well, yeah, I graduated from University of California, Santa Cruz, go Banana Slugs, class of 2015. I majored in literature. Writing has always been something that I've been extremely passionate about and a source of catharsis for me. And I just wanted to be able to really master my craft and see what I can do with it. That's led for me to do a great multitude of things, from technical writing to blogging for Huffington Post to creative writing. I mean, it's just literature, I think, is such an undervalued tool, and I really hope to show its significance in our time through my work. And I'm on my path to be a doctor of literature, and I'm just trying to live day to day, man, just everyone else in this world.
So you gonna be a sports doctor or just regular doctor?
Oh, just a regular doctor. I'll be a sports doctor in my own time. I
thought you were aiming to be the doctor for the Celtics.
Well, hey, I mean, if they call me up and say we need you, I'm catching the first flight to Boston. So
Isaiah Thomas is in some health challenges right now, so maybe he needs your help.
Hey, you know what? I will do anything I could to help that man. I mean,
All
I
right.
believe he's a Boston folk hero already, and he hasn't even won a championship yet. So,
Okay,
um,
where'd the love of Boston come from?
to be honest, okay, this is really it's a really
Yeah,
funny story.
yeah, okay.
So I'm from Southern California. Lancaster's an hour and 15 minutes, give or take, away from LA. I didn't like the pressure that I felt to like LA teams. And that, this was after
Oh,
the Lakers have been good for, a while. And I just didn't really vibe with any of them. And so because of that type of animosity, I guess, or that pressure put upon me, I looked at the team that LA Lakers hated. I didn't bother with the Clippers because it's the Clippers. no one really, no one really acknowledges them in the LA market. But I just turned out that it was the Boston Celtics, and I read more about the Boston Celtics, how they were the first team to start a black player, the first team to draft one. They had the first black coach. In a sports era where racism was dominant, and I just fell in love with their history and kind of like who they were as a team, what their identity was, and I just been a lover ever since.
okay. There's this Boston defense. Boston strong. There you go.
Bleed green.
Oh, okay. All right. We're getting off this topic. All right. We're moving. This is people did not come to hear about the Celtics. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. So let's
Yeah, I don't think so either.
no. So let's shift. When we chatted a few weeks ago,
Hmm.
we were chatting about your upcoming podcast, which is now in still, I say beta stages. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And we're having just a conversation. I always ask my friends that come on the Dr. Vibe show, what do you want to talk about? We started having a conversation, and then the topic of masculinity came up and masculinity in sports. So that's what we're gonna vibe about tonight. And if anyone has questions in the chat room, please give them to us, share them with us. We'd like to get your takes. But why, Alexander, do you want to chat? What do you want to share about this topic this evening?
Well, I mean, I just think it's a really interesting type of phenomenon that we've been seeing in sports. In certain sports, there can be a tendency for a more vigilant display of masculinity, for instance, football or rugby. And then in another case, there's almost this more kind of calm or collected sense of masculinity that we see in the NBA or even, so let's say, tennis or soccer. And I just think that it's a really kind of shift that we've been noticing. One of my biggest markers of that is the trending bromances, quote unquote, that have been happening across all the North American professional sports teams. I mean, let's say the one very well documented is LeBron and Dwayne Wade, right, from all their time in Miami. And we saw Instagram pictures of them, out on vacations together, some of their road trip travels. And I just think that this type of acceptance and, accessibility, because these are social media platforms, this level of accessibility that's been happening to these types of positive male images, especially when it comes to friendship, black men in particular, it's just something that I think is just really nice. And I think that's something that we need to kind of appreciate in this time.
There's a few things we're going to roll with tonight, but let me ask in regards to yourself. Has this topic had any effect on you? If you've played any sports, have you been exposed to the masculinity, and has it had you make some tough choices or wonder, hey, what's going on with me and my masculinity partaking in sports?
Well, I don't think it's so much as I think it's kind of when you're a kid and you kind of are trying to figure out where you are kind of placed in life, you kind of try different sports, right? You try to see what physically you can kind of be good at, because sometimes when it comes to, small children, there's a bunch of activity that needs to be expressed. And a lot of times people try to channel that through sports. And so for me, sports was something like I wanted to be good at, but I didn't realize my height for basketball. So I never developed the finesse that I could get from being the height that I am. So that limited me in, that range. But when it came to something like football, that was just something that came, I think, so natural to me just because of the physicality of it. And I think when you realize, how sometimes brutal football can be as a sport, even though that's why I kind of fell in love with it, to be honest, it's physical catharsis. Um, it's a different level of masculinity there, right? Because you're constantly in this environment where you're going up against this resistance. There's other force out there that's outside of yourself. And whenever you're confronting something, that can have an equal consequence. So, the type of football players that are out there, and they're getting hit in the head, and they develop some type of, like anger problem. Like that might just be a reaction to, this constant violence that they see in their workplace. Um, and I think that it's interesting to, for me to bring up the bromance kind of part that we see in the sports, because I think that's kind of like the other end of the spectrum. So, on one end, we have some players that, really enjoy, hitting each other and everything like this. On one end of the spectrum is, the violent kind of representation of masculinity. And then on the other side, we see, sportsmanship and, like, friends, players being friends with each other and, hanging out outside of like the off season and, really kind of like making a social stand sometimes with what happened with Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James when they spoke about, what's happening in the black men community. I just think it's a really interesting kind of duality between all of that.
I'm gonna parking lot this part of the conversation for a section, come back to it. But it's interesting. I was doing some research today, and I saw a really interesting article, uh, "Masculinity in Sports," ironically, written
Hmm.
by a lady named Stephanie W. Doesn't give her last name, but I'm gonna just read the first few lines of the conversation. I think it'll be very good to build from what she's sharing here. And she starts off, the idea of masculinity is everywhere and is even more prevalent in sports. Boys are taught from a young age to grow up to be big strong men and to show their dominance as these strong beings. As they get older, these ideas begin to unfold more and more, and in some cases, such as sports, we see the ideas become harsher and more advanced than just wanting men to be masculine. I'll just stop right there. There's more to come, but I thought right there, do you still see, and did you experience growing up, that there was influences, whether they were parental or environmental wise, that you should be a masculine person, especially when you're playing sports?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I have not. I mean, and I think one of the sports I just listed, football, that's, can be somewhat prevalent because you have to literally be tough because you have to be able to withstand, multiple people tackling you throughout a game. So there is this inherent, driving message of like, you gotta be strong, you gotta be tough, you like, you can't be this, you can't be that, but that has a certain line to it. And I think that it's important to make that distinction when it comes to on and off the field. You can have that type of message, to be gritty and uh, tough and, to be able to withstand a lot of blows on the field, but on off the field, you're still a human being. And
But
I
can
think,
but let me put it that way, and we're just having a conversation here. Can't the field of play still allowed to be human beings?
yeah, but I mean, I think when it gets to that phenomenon that you kind of trailed off at on the end when you read from that piece, it's I mean a lot more factors come into play there. So say you're a small kid and you just are pretty good at basketball, and that's just something that you kind of develop into your own. You start going into teams and everything. When you get up until that like teenage, preteen years, I mean, especially in the type of basketball organization that we live in today within the United States. I mean, what's going on with the AAU teams? There's a lot of pressure that's already being put upon you, and so to succeed. And so I imagine that sometimes that pressure and an individual's manifestations of that pressure can, I mean, alter other people's view of their own masculinity. I mean, because he can, like, let's say a developing prospect, from the NCAA or something, like freaks out on a reporter. all of a sudden they're gonna say that, oh, like this is, someone that's not ready for the NBA, or like this is someone that's not professional or whatever. But it's like you don't understand like the amount of pressure that man had up until that point. You see what I'm saying? And how that could be, and how someone can reflect on their masculinity. So I'm just saying that I think sometimes we lose that aspect of sports. Is just remembering that these people that
It's
are
a
playing
game.
these
It's a
are
game.
human beings.
Yeah, it's a game. I'm gonna push on a little bit because I find this is a very interesting article, and she then goes, let me just say we should be harsher, more advanced, more advanced. This is why I'd like to look at these masculine ideas that are related to this topic of men in sports. First is hegemonic masculinity. Hegemonic masculinity is defined by Anderson in these four simple rules that men need to abide by in sports. No sissy stuff, be a big wheel, be a sturdy oak, and give 'em hell.
I mean, I've only heard like one of those four. What was the be a big oak?
Be a sturdy, like be strong, be really have a big presence, like almost like
is
be a
that?
man, like be a man, sort of stand strong, don't let anything phase you, etc.
Is that what they say to people in Stanford? Be an oak.
Oh, and we won't go about one of their past graduates either. That's a whole other story. Let me just move on in regards to, and then she says the second is hypermasculinity. Hypermasculinity is characterized by the exaggeration of traditionally masculine traits or behavior. Now, that's something I think we could certainly talk a lot on about hypermasculinity in
Hmm.
sports. And I think one of the best recent examples was Bryce Harper of the. I don't know if you saw that incident.
Oh, the fight. Are you talking about with the
Yeah.
Giants?
What? Like the pitcher threw at him, and it seems that they had issues from a few years ago, and he comes flailing out, throwing a helmet at the guy, and I don't. I guess when it's what is a limit of masculinity in sports? Are there no limits?
I mean, it's okay. There it definitely is because there's a great line between extremes of anything. Radicalism within any type of aspect. But to reference directly that Bryce Harper video, I mean, I don't know about you. I have gotten hit by a baseball before, not at 100 miles per hour though. It hurts. And I mean,
Yeah.
apparently they had a history going back
Yes.
like for 3 years ago. So I mean, there was a lot of complicated things that might have been going on there. I mean, I'm not saying I condone what he did, but if someone threw 100-mile fastball at my hip, and this is a guy I already have beef with, I mean, I feel like that touches more into an emotional place than it does a need to display hypermasculinity. You see what I'm saying? Um, but on the other hand, it is important to discern what is just a display of masculinity and what is a display of hypermasculinity, because a display of hypermasculinity has a lot more tendency to be toxic, rather than just a display of masculinity.
Oh,
With hypermasculinity, sometimes there can be a root of some type of compensation, which is why this display of hypermasculinity is happening in the first place. So I will say that it's important to make both of those points.
and I follow with you there. Now, let me just see. So, taking that incident with Bryce Harper, do you think that's a reference of hypermasculinity on both ends, like the pitcher throwing at him and Bryce Harper's response? Would you regard
I
both those as hypermasculinity in action?
I would say, if anything, you could make the argument that from the pitcher side, that was a need to display hypermasculinity because he took the pitcher's mound, essentially a small piece of theater in the round, um, and used that as the platform to demonstrate his feelings towards Bryce Harper. So, if anything, if you are going to go the hypermasculinity route in that one particular instance, I mean, I would say that the easiest argument to make would be for the pitcher. I mean, Bryce Harper maybe have just reacted because like it really hurt to get hit by that fastball, and this is a guy that chose to make that display out here. So I mean, it could have just been a simple, like, all right, you hit me, now I have to hit you type of thing. But I mean, if we are going to give the hypermasculinity crown, I think that goes to the pitcher.
Okay.
Who actually, I didn't, did he get like knocked out at the end of that?
You know
Because
what? I didn't watch the full thing. I heard about it. I just said, really? Like on both ends, like use the ball, hit the ball, pitch the ball, balls and strikes, hit. That's to me would be the best form of displaying your masculinity. But hey, who am I?
well, hey, don't forget that we have. I mean, they're a lot more organized than what happened in the Bryce Harper incident. But let's not forget that we have organized fighting in hockey. Would you question if that's a display of hypermasculinity or just masculinity?
Why are they fighting? Why do they need to fight? Fights don't score goals. Last I checked, most goals scored wins. Not most not most fights win.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, sports are what? They're kind of like this derivative of, what people in Rome would gather to go see in the Colosseum, right? It's some type of, event that they can spectate and they can judge freely because they're not actually in it.
Right.
And there's also some type of physical element driving it, right? There has to be some type of urgency, that some type of like dire situation. So if all of these sports that we're kind of entertaining right now are a derivative of that type of, ideal, then maybe they just contain a lot of those types of traditions, whether like in rules or just the type of culture that it embodies. I would say when it comes to hockey and they're fighting, it's just like the same thing with Bryce Harper. Maybe a guy just checks you one more time than you would like them to, and you get physical catharsis, man. You gotta let it out. I mean, wouldn't you like them to fight in a very controlled environment in front of people so that, they obviously don't take it too far, rather than going outside in some type of parking lot and just beating the crap out of each other there? I mean, I would choose for the former because at least that can be controlled. I mean, mind you, that's also what's happening between, the difference between a fighting in hockey and what we just saw there. Fighting in hockey is controlled, it's organized, and to a lot more degree than it is in other sports. I mean, besides UFC.
Right, right. So, and you brought up a number of interesting points there, and one of them was about the whole thing about going back to the days of Rome, that it seems that the masculinity piece, the competitive piece in sports, has always been there, and we're just looking at it in different forms or seeing it in different forms, whether it's controlled or not. It's been baseline right from the beginning of time with the lions and the whole bit back in Rome and forever and ever. It just is it, do you feel that masculinity in sports is at a good place right now or not a good place?
I mean, I think it's in a progressing place. I mean, obviously there's a lot of, negative things that are going on in sports when it comes to, issues of masculinity. Let's bring it back to baseball, for instance. There was a there was that Blue Jays player
Yes.
that got suspended
Kevin
for
Pillar.
homophobic slurs.
Yep, Kevin Pillar.
And if you are a gay MLB player, that might affect your masculinity in a certain way. And then there was the whole thing with what happened with Michael Sam, I believe, with him being a gay player in the NFL, and how that might impact his masculinity. So I mean, there are obvious holes that need fixing, and questions and concerns that need to be addressed. But at the same time, like I bring up what's going on in the NBA, and but also on the flip side in the NFL, the bromance that happened between Marshawn Lynch and actually that's still going on between Marshawn Lynch and Aaron Rodgers. They went to Cal together, and I remember seeing highlight clips, so to speak, of Marshawn Lynch between every game, like playing against the Packers. He would just go up to Aaron Rodgers and like smother him in this like big like bear hug that only Marshawn Lynch can give people, and it's good to see that too, and I think that's in some aspect kind of the more direction we need to go in when it comes to like sports. Is like just understanding that there's going to be some type of physical, maybe sometimes even violent aspect to it, but at the same time, this need to still show love on the field, and to really just have respect to the game and what it, not only means to you, but what it means to, that kid you were growing up playing in. And so I think, when we kind of keep in mind those types of values, then I think that's really when we're going to get in a even much more solid direction in sports in terms of masculinity.
It's interesting you mentioned that, and coming back to where you were mentioning on the front end of our conversation about the bromance issue, that a number of old school NBA players say that they don't like what's going on in the NBA these days. So you had just talked about what goes on between a LeBron James and a why am I forgetting his name now?
Dwayne Wade, come
Dwayne
on, D
Wade.
Wade, baby.
Dwayne Wade. That them wanting to play together, them hanging out together. They're saying, "Hey, man, they would say we would never do that back in our day." Like Magic Johnson would say, "Hey, I would never hang out with Larry
He
Bird."
still hates the Celtics. He still hates the Celtics.
Right? So, and it's
He
going to
loves
get
Larry
into
Bird, though.
it's going to be intensified because Magic's a GM now, so it's going to be back like old school. But has with the old school saying, that's not a good thing, but new school saying, hey, this is what we are. This is our form of master. Yeah, we play games against each other, but we're friends.
See, I don't think that the two are mutually exclusive. Okay, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's this very thin line, this very, small Goldilocks area where we can have both. We can have dudes that literally hate each other, and dudes that love each other. I mean, it's not because keep in mind they are human beings. They're gonna have individual relationships with people that are outside whatever expectation we can provide. Correct? I mean, I imagine that the relationship that DeMar DeRozan has with Kyle Lowry, for instance, is probably a lot different than the relationship he might have with someone like Matt Barnes. So,
Sure.
I mean, those two individuals might have a beef versus, Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan being probably the biggest bromance of the NBA. They FaceTime like every day. I mean, they're totally just their friendship is amazing. It's inspiring. But I think that we can have both. I mean, look, if we're talking about the old school guys, we're talking about the Jordan era of basketball. If you look up Scottie Pippen on YouTube, the second result is Scottie Pippen dunks on Patrick Ewing. I don't know if you remember this dunk, but Scottie Pippen made Patrick Ewing look like a stepdad. Like he
Oh, wow.
he jumped on him and he pushed him off when he made the dunk, stepped over him, and it's like that. There's that in basketball too. Like you can have a type of what people might make the argument of hyper masculine display, but at the same time, he was buddies with Jordan and still is. So it's like you can have both. I just don't think that you need to police behavior in that type of way. Like, if now what Scottie Pippen did would be called like an offensive flagrant foul, or something like that. I think that's where the line needs to draw, because you can have what happened between Scottie Pippen and Patrick Ewing, but you can also have, Devin Booker and Karl Anthony Towns coming up to each other before games and hugging. It's not mutually exclusive.
What effect does the whole masculinity in sports do you feel have on men who aren't sports athletes and in society in general? So let's take a look at men who aren't sports athletes. What effect do you think the state of masculinity today masculinity in sports has effect on them?
Well, I mean, the masculine figures in sports might serve as this kind of standard that they're like judged against. I mean, there's that common black men stereotype that, oh, you're a black guy, you should probably be good at basketball, right? I mean, if you're not, that probably impacts your masculinity, because people keep trying to attribute this ability to you that you might just not be able to have, and that's not your fault because of who you are. And so I think when it starts getting into that type of realm, that's when, it just becomes really unacceptable. But at the same time, it's like, how can we stop other people from making those types of comparisons? When we still haven't been able to root out a great deal of problems throughout everything else in the United States as institutions.
So do you feel that the state of masculinity in sports, its effect on men is not allowing men to define themselves?
Well, I mean, I think when the way that other people use sports is, and especially their lens and what a masculine or a male figure is, I mean, if someone thinks that the ultimate masculine figure is, LeBron James, and they go around and won't accept anyone that is, doesn't fit that caliber, then that's a problem in the way that person is applying sports, and a masculine image. I mean, the great deal of just worldwide players that we have in the NBA, the soccer leagues, hockey. I mean, I think what's really interesting about sports being globalized is the introduction of new and different ideas of masculinity, because then the sport can serve as like a melting pot of different, cultures and values. And I think I really like what that can, breed, and what, effect that can have on the social state of masculinity in sports.
So, what do you feel your thoughts on when it comes to sports and masculinity on its effect uh, in regards to women, men's dealing with women?
What do you mean?
Well, I think that okay. Here's a perfect. We all know about the guy who would like to be like his football or basketball hero,
Hmm.
and carrying on that, maybe carrying on that attitude at times, whether rightly or wrongly. And sometimes, are you having any concern of those type of gentlemen who carry on that attitude outside of men or just in general society, because what they see as masculinity on the playing field, some of them may think that, oh, that's the way I should conduct myself in everyday
Mm.
life. Can they separate the playing field from the non-playing field?
I think at that point it's just a question of perception awareness. The is the certain individual perceptible or aware of, you know that there's a switch. There's a need to react to different environments in different ways. You can't come at the dentist like you would, a quarterback if you're, a defensive tackle. Like, what are you gonna beat up the dentist? Like, there's a time and place for everything. And I think when it comes to that type of phenomenon that you described, I think that's just a question of, is this person accepting the reality that they actually live in? And if not, then it's how can this be made, apparent to this individual? Some people, when confronted with realities that they don't accept as their own, they might, respond in fear, they might respond in denial, they might respond in anger. But I think it's just really a matter of, making that known. Because if a person has made known a truth and just denies that truth, then that obviously speaks a lot more to how you can progress with them as people. If you could, how you can work with them, or work to change them. And so I think those are the types of, things that need to be addressed when we see that.
Do you feel that the major sports leagues are handling this issue well? Or is there anything, or should they be concerned about this issue? And if they are, what should they be doing or what should they not be doing?
So, are you asking if they should be concerned about their own players? Kind
Yes.
of not. Okay.
Yes.
So, okay. So, are we? I mean, are we discussing like someone like like Pac-Man? Like someone that just gets into trouble with the law
Yeah,
off the
yeah,
field.
like we're getting into that realm because because we all know that there are a number of athletes out there that feel that they're above a law or above
Mm,
reproach, and I
okay.
think that maybe part of that is rightly or wrongly part is could be called masculinity, and maybe a hyper masculinity,
Hmm.
feeling that they are above reproach. You know, should do you feel that the sports leagues should be taking a better stand against this? Are they taking a good stand? Are they policing? Because we don't. The sad thing, one of the sad things I think about is there are like just take the NFL, hundreds of
Hmm.
players in the NFL, hundreds.
Hmm.
We only see them on the playing field, and now because of social media, we do see or hear about if they behave badly. We hear about it a little bit more, but there's still a lot of them are under the radar.
Hmm.
Do you feel that professional leagues should take a more aggressive stance in regards to monitoring not only masculinity or hypermasculinity on the field, but hypermasculinity off the field.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the contracts that NFL players just in particular have to sign, they include a morality clause. And so,
Oh, okay, but do you really? How?
no, no,
Okay,
obviously, no,
yeah,
I'm not
exactly,
saying that's,
exactly.
no, no,
They do
I'm not
include,
saying
but they,
obviously that
but
stop
that's
anything.
but that's where my conversation piece is going. Do you feel that they could be doing more than they are?
Yeah, no, and I mean that's where I was going with this is that I think that morality clause needs to encompass a little bit more and be not only much more succinct but also much more expansive. And I mean, particularly when it comes to domestic violence that we see in the NFL, I mean that needs to be a much more serious issue, than how it's being presented. A lot I've seen more teams, cut players and everything, but the obvious thing is if he's the most talented player on the football field, he might still be able to play, just because a team wants to put themselves in a position to win. And I don't agree with that, but I mean we can see that's the type of reality that we live in now. I think that so far the NBA has done a pretty good job of that. But I mean, again, there's still players of that type, whether they keep it under the radar or they have a history of it, playing in the NBA. So, I mean, it is something that needs to be a lot, and it needs to be a focus moving forward. If we're really going to say that sports is a way that we can define ourselves, and how we kind of relate with our own culture. But we have to also understand, like, that this is a multifaceted problem. Whether
Yes.
it's the need for these particular individuals to display, some type of hypermasculinity, what their particular sport might be doing to them health wise. Like if it's a football player, has he had like 12 concussions in the course of his life? Like how much brain damage is that causing?
Well,
Um,
just
and
to
then
just interrupt you there, a very good example happened recently. How Tom Brady's wife mentioned that he's had concussions, but he's never told anybody. Like, is that not wise, or is that part of being masculine, being the tough guy over health?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, what do you describe Tom Brady as a tough person?
I wouldn't
Like
say
you yourself?
no, but not being tough. But let me put it: being masculine versus sensible.
Mm. I think with Tom Brady, maybe he was trying to figure out a way to tell her. I don't know. I mean, for if it's just getting out now, I imagine that it wouldn't be singular. I don't think that Tom Brady would necessarily only have one concussion. If this is like something that's just now getting out when it could have gotten out earlier in his playing career, so there's a good chance there might be multiple ones. Um, I mean, his decision not to tell anyone. I don't. I mean, that might just be an intensely personal matter that we might attribute some type of label to. So we could say him not telling anyone is him trying to be masculine, or is him being insensible. But the fact of the matter is, we don't know why. He didn't report it. So it's whatever type of label we would place on something that has an unknown factor like that, I think would just be unnecessary. But when it comes to players' health and how how their displays masculinity might tie into that. I mean, I think that is a cause of concern if this is a person that repeatedly has had concussions going on in their life. I've had concussions, and I know that like
Wow.
they say with concussions, it's like the next one is gonna be that much worse, and you're gonna be more likely to get it again. And it's true. I mean, like I've started to like forget certain things or only be able to like remember like certain aspects of event, and that's just because like I don't know if like the neural pathway is there anymore, And so I think, but at the same time, like this is the sport that they signed up for, man. This is
True.
why we pay them millions of dollars, is because they make their body take sacrifices that we don't want to. I
And
mean,
again,
and that in itself also has something powerful in it too, because this type of pedestal that we might put sports players, we're guilty of that as the general public. We put them on a pedestal of where you know let's say a person of like Michael Jordan has such cultural capital just because of what he accomplished on the basketball court. I mean, some people like they have entire rooms dedicated to this man. You know what I'm saying? And that might influence a particular person's display of masculinity, but it's only when it goes into the more toxic realm do I feel like that then it becomes a problem.
And it's interesting. You had mentioned earlier on too the whole area of, like, especially if you look at the NFL, they're looking for talent, and a lot of times they're willing to just turn their head
Hmm.
in regards to issues that of hyper masculinity of players. Like well, I'm sure there's numbers of players that we could just you had
Well, let
mentioned.
me ask you this because the NFL draft just happened. So, do you know about the player Joe Mixon?
Yes,
Okay, so what are your thoughts on that? Was that what he did? Was that hyper masculine?
I think it was. Yeah, what he did, he attacked a lady. Yeah, I think, and I think if I would question anyone who doesn't think that that's a hyper masculinity
Okay,
event.
so now is it hyper masculine or is it a toxic masculine move?
What's the
Because
difference? What's
is there a difference between the two?
well? There's the question.
Mm.
Is there a difference between hypermasculinity and toxic masculinity? And it's too bad because I did a whole series with a year co-hosted for a year and a half, a series with Dr. Charles Corprew, and the series was from black male hyper masculinity to by black male masculinity, and it would
Hmm.
be good. It would be good to have him on this conversation. I'm actually going to make a note of that and ask him if there's a difference between those two things.
I mean, because look, we masculinity, it's not bullet points, right? It's a spectrum, and it's all encompassing. It has one from one end of the spectrum to the other. So for me, I mean, I'm just imagining is hyper masculinity like closer to one end of the spectrum, and toxic masculinity is like the further part, going towards that extreme, or are they just the same? Like, are they the same dot in the number line? That's my wonder.
It's a good point. I'm taking down that conversation piece, and I'll be sending him a via video that question, and I'll certainly follow up with you and follow up with the audience, like the difference between hyper masculinity and toxic masculinity, because we see hyper masculinity in sports all the time. Like a lot of times we don't see. How many times do we see an event where there isn't an instance of hyper masculinity?
Mm.
But
Well,
is there a
I
different?
mean,
Go ahead.
there's also outside of sports as well. Like there's also, okay, when can we just see hypermasculinity or toxic masculinity just in everyday life? You know what I'm saying? Um, and so, I mean, it's important to know that before these sports stars were sports stars, they were little kids. They're little kids being socialized into things. They're little kids having things, be done to them, whether it's you know personal experiences going on with their family or academic or what have you. And so for me, what I'm also interested in is what's being done at that level to try to, rid kids of these toxic ideals that happen to be so ingrained in sports.
Well, there's our next. We can go into the conversation piece. At when you were younger and you were participating in sports, was there things being done to control hypermasculinity? Not if not just yourself, but just with players in general. Did you see any incidents of hypermasculinity, and it was addressed in a proper manner, if at all?
Well, I mean, it just from my small sample size, uh, there's sometimes that hypermasculinity can get out of control. Say that you're in a practice, and it's right after you lost a game, in high school, let's say for football, and the sun is really hot, and that guy that you don't necessarily hate or you don't like, you've only seen him around a couple times. He doesn't play the same position on you. He's on the other side of the field, and he hits you a little too harder than you'd like, and so you push him, and a fight ensues. I think that type of like instance that we can see, in a common type of practice isn't necessarily like a toxic thing that happens in masculinity, but it can also be something that is like stopped, from a coach, whether that's like early on in this with like a child, or it's high school level or what have you. But I mean, in my experience, it's something that sometimes is controlled and sometimes not. It's really up to the culture that's being established with that sport, in terms of the people that are controlling it in that environment. And so it's really, when you think about it, it's kind of more a human question. Is the human beings that are put into power really taking that responsibility seriously, and what are they doing to show that?
So, do you feel that more policing needs to be done in the major sports?
Oh yeah, most definitely. When like I said, when it comes to issues of domestic violence and guys just clearly demonstrating that they don't have not only just a regard for their team, because these are professionals, mind you. They are, I am like Shaq can say he's a professional. He was a professional sports player, and that's what he did as his profession, and he tried to be the best at that. But at the same time, it's like you got to understand, not only when you do things like that, you're not letting down, this the team or anything like that. I mean, you're just being a terrible human being, and I mean
Yeah,
that's all like
just the bottom
that's the
line.
real question
Yeah.
that needs to be answered, through sports. I think is like what does it mean to be a human being? And for some people, sports is an avenue for them to try to answer that question, And for me, I think that's also why I like sports. I'm also just trying to figure out that answer.
It's interesting because you hear, like for the last number of years, you hear more and more how many parents, especially mothers, are questioning their sons' participation in sports like football. You even hear some football players who have retired saying, "You know what? I'm not. I'm telling my kids not to play." I think one of them was it. I'm thinking maybe Eric Dickerson said that he wouldn't want his
Mm.
kids playing football, but you hear more and more, and
I
it's
think Arian Foster said that as
yeah,
well.
Arian Foster saying, and again, obviously the health end of it, and you had mentioned concussions earlier, but I also think playing that aspect of, oh, I have a concussion, I'm gonna play through it. That masculinity side, I think society is slowly changing in regards to that in ways that they want their young people to be participants in sports, and they want to put a restriction at what point. There are certainly more and more parents are now putting a sort of a line in the sand saying, hey, if this happens, no more. Whereas when I was growing up, when you were growing up, no, it's all right. It's all right. You'll be back next week, etc. I think,
Mm.
and I think we're seeing now a little bit less tolerance, especially for younger people when it comes to masculinity in sports. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you touched upon a great subject, because that's actually the reason why I wasn't able to pursue football, is because when it came down to the high school level, my mom would not sign the medical clearance papers.
Wow.
I begged her. I begged her to. I begged
Wow.
her to. I said, football means everything to me, and it did. Like I'm not like I legitimately know that I am a different person because I was never able to pursue football. Football meant so much to me growing up because, like you said, and then like we talked about, at some core of who I am, it did mean to me something in terms of my masculinity, because I was able to display it in a very controlled environment, but I wanted to be able to be in that environment, and I wanted
So,
to be
so
able to
Alexander,
express.
let me interrupt you. How did that not being able to pursue football affect your masculinity at all, and does it still have any effect on your masculinity today?
Well, it changed, who I could have been as a person. Being fat for most of my life was like affecting my masculinity, because I constantly felt bad that I didn't measure up to this type of physical, form that these sports players have. Like most, a lot of the NFL players, they're super cut. They are in great shape. LeBron James is the like epitome of like what the frame of a human being can be. And so I knew that when I wanted to do football, that was also a way for me that I was going to be able to like control my exercise, and control like and be able to kind of make it so that tainted sense of masculinity that I had wouldn't be so tainted, because I was able to do something about it,
Right.
and football was going to allow me to have that freedom. Um, but now in terms of it affecting my masculinity now, it doesn't as much as it did, because I have to accept it, like there's nothing I can do about it, like unless I'm able to go into grad school and like I can play in the NCAA as like a graduate student, then I will definitely
Okay,
it'll
okay.
definitely affect my life a lot more.
Oh,
But
so
I
let
mean,
me ask you. Say you go to grad school. Say you get the
mhm.
say you had the opportunity to play football. Would you play it?
I would like, besides the my graduate studies, that would be the only thing in my life. Like I don't care if I had to I don't care if I had to wake up at 3 a.m. to go on a practice field to just try to run routes or just try to catch balls. Like if I had the opportunity, like one of the practice squad coaches came up to me and was like, "Hey man, I like your size. Like you ever try to play football?" I told him my story and he was like, "All right, well, meet me at this field at this time." Like at that moment, like I'm changing it. I'm just gonna try to change everything I eat. I'm gonna like, just throw it my all because that legitimately, like if I that was a dream that was taken away from me, and if I ever got the chance to actually give it my all to that dream, it doesn't matter if what, I might get put in all this effort and day two tear my ACL. And that might just, be the end of it. But at least I got to try. Like that's all I wanted when I was a
You
kid.
want an
I
opportunity.
wanted, yeah, I just wanted the opportunity to try.
It's interesting. I'm just thinking about how many men out there have gone through what you have in regards to them matching their identity with them participating in sports and masculinity. How close a relationship masculinity and playing sports is, and then having it taken away from them for whatever reason. What effect does that have on their masculinity, and are they able to adjust, if at all?
Well, I mean, that's that was the a really big thing in my life because up until a certain amount of years ago, I wasn't able to accept it. Because it just felt too, I guess, raw in a sense. Like the wound was so deep that it was something that took a long time for me to emotionally get over. But I mean, that phenomenon that I like, there's, like I said, a lot of these things end in spectrums. On one end of the spectrum, we get Arian Foster. These players that he was a player that had gone through all of this. He has that personal experience, and having gone through that personal experience, he doesn't want his kids to do that for themselves. That is a very particular type of case versus like someone in my family, like my parents, not going through it, but just being on the outside and then still wanting me not to do it. I was never able to tap into that personal experience, someone that Arian Foster has, like where I could have that access and knowledge. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand the agency of these matters. These football players, like or basketball players, what have you, they're getting paid millions of dollars to do these things. And they have the agency to do it. Like when you know Arian Foster's kid is in high school. I'm not going to tell this dude how to raise his kids. That's not my place. But I would hope that if his son was like, Dad, I want to play football. Like this is just something I want to do. Like it could be regardless of him. He does. It's not like about, oh, I want to follow in my dad's footsteps or something. But just that he, as an agent of his own behavior, wants to take this upon himself. Then you have to like take that into serious consideration. And for me, growing up in a kind of in a low income area, that was just really important because I mean a lot of dudes use sports and the money that it provides as an escape.
Yep, it's their way out of their situation.
And that's important because I mean if you like, and the more low income area you live in, the more crime can happen, but it's like it's this very serious reality that they live in, and they use sports as an escape from that, and that can also tie into their portrayal and image of masculinity. So, the masculine, the relationship that masculinity has in sports is it's incredibly multifaceted, just like so many other
Just
things
like the
in our culture
conversation we've
are.
had, just like the conversation has gone all over different places, it's still related to the core. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask us to wind it down because I know you've had a crazy day as always. But any final thoughts on this subject? And I have a feeling we're going to do a part two on this, and I'm going to see if I can reach out to Dr. Corprew because this is part of his core talking about
Mm,
hypermasculinity and especially men of color, and bring his perspective in. But any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I mean, I think this was a really, interesting conversation. I just, I love to get certain viewpoints across, and discuss certain things because for me, a lot of the media, at least in my experience, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't talk about things like this.
No, they
Like
don't.
when you turn on ESPN, like what the conversation you and I just had, this isn't breaking news. It's like, oh, did LeBron James stub his toe in Game 3? How does Kyrie Irving feel about it? And so it's I just like that there's these platforms out here where we get to talk about the side of sports, and what it can mean for young men out there. And I think that this type of conversation, needs to go a long way.
Excellent. If people want to touch base with you, how can they do that?
You can hit me up on Twitter, Dan the Malformed. Check out my Huffington blog posts. Just type in Huffington Post and Alexander Williams. And then yeah, just in the upcoming weeks, check out a little surprise I'm cooking up. So
I won't say another thing. I'm gonna play three monkeys to that surprise. Hear no, speak no, see no on that one. But thanks again for taking time to join us and another from your positive productive schedule. And congratulations. I didn't know you're still doing more stuff for HuffPost.
yeah, I'm still working on like 4 or 5 of them right now. Like I'm
Wow.
kind of yeah, I'm trying to edit them and get them all through, but I'm hoping to like machine gun them. So
All right, all right. Well, it's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations. Also know that I'm a certified empowerment coach, president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. If you would like a complimentary 30-minute empowerment session, touch base with me. How can you do that? One of 3 ways are the best. Email dr.vibe at the dr.vibeshow. You can also touch base with me via Twitter at drvibeshow. And you can also use the contact form on the website, www.thedrvibeshow.com. On that contact page, you can, even if you want, leave me a voicemail message from your computer. You can leave me a video message, and you can also have the contact of Twitter and email that are on there. So no excuses on that page. Every way you want to get in touch with me, it's there. So don't give me any sob stories you couldn't get a hold of Dr. Vibe. I put it out there. So if you want to listen to any of the replays of my epic conversations, the video ones, you can check the YouTube channel, which you're watching right now. They're live on the replay. And thanks again. I'm up to almost 200 subscribers, and I'm very humbled with that. That's great. Thanks for all the support. Also, if audio-wise, number of platforms, website address, if I already mentioned, there's Apple Podcasts. There is what I'm thinking, iHeartRadio, Tuned In Radio, Stitcher Radio, soon to put Selective Conversations on SoundCloud too. And the Good Men Project and WJMS Radio, and more to come. So that is it for another epic conversation. As always, I like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. God bless, peace be well, keep the faith, and also remember, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Thanks for watching live on the replay and on the replay. Take care and keep the faith.